So I grew up in the church, Sunday school and youth group, and listening to my dad preaching from the pews, a complete Christian upbringing. I've always loved comedy, I've always loved humor. I dabbled with it in my own writing and had written some satire on my own long before I even had heard of the Bee or before the Bee existed. It is a misconception, by the way, the idea that I started the Bee. I didn't start it, I acquired it. The founder of the Bee had been running this Christian comic thing that he was doing online. I was really aimed at filling this void where nobody was doing comedy from that perspective. There wasn't like a lot of Christian conservative worldview comedy happening. You know, the secular progressive left was dominating that world. But he saw that there was a potential there that if somebody did it well and they weren't cheesy with it, they actually produced good content, maybe it would take off. Maybe there'd be a big audience for this. They've got to be starved for it. They got to be hungry for it. Next thing I know, I've got this satire site. I'm like, what do I do with it now? You know, it wasn't making any money. It was this little operation that involved just 2 or 3 people. The big tech platforms had started working with fact checkers like Snopes, for example, because they were concerned about all the backlash they were getting for Trump having gotten elected. One of the claims was, you know, Zuckerberg is responsible for this because he let misinformation just spread on his platform. He didn't do enough to stop the spread of conservative publications printing conservative opinions and news. And so there was this effort to clamp down on the spread of misinformation. The fact checkers would look at articles, whether satirical or not, and they would give them a truth rating, whether they were true or false. And so some of our jokes were getting rated false, and then Facebook was sending us these warning messages saying you can't put false news on our platform or we'll demonetize you and take you down. So the first one was this headline about how CNN had purchased an industrial-sized washing machine to spin the news in before publishing it. There's this image of this washing machine with the CNN logo on it. It's a silly joke. It wasn't even really that funny. It was just a jab at CNN and their bias. But what was funny was that it got fact-checked by Snopes and rated false. That was hysterical to us. But then it came with a penalty. It was like, well, if you keep doing this, you can't stay on Facebook. These big companies exercise so much control, and it's ideologically driven control. You know, they are not just able but willing to suppress or amplify voices that they either don't want to be heard or want to be heard. And so the fact that the powers that be were actively trying to suppress our voice and cancel us attracted a tremendous amount of media attention, particularly from the right, because the right saw it as outrageous that humorists, that satirists were being censored and threatened with deplatforming. So, you know, I was getting invited on Tucker Carlson to talk about it. It was really raising our profile and making more people aware of who the Bee was and what we were doing. And we took a very hard stance in justifying what we do and arguing that we have a right to do it, that, you know, you can't take this right away from us, and that it's important that we have humor and be able to laugh at ourselves. And so very early on, we were starting to get into that battle. The next phase of the story of how they were trying to come after us was by making all these rules about what you can and can't joke about. It's not just misinformation. There's topics that you can't make fun of. There's groups that you can't make fun of. They're trying to safeguard people by protecting them from humor. USA Today published a headline about how Rachel Levine had been named their pick for Woman of the Year. We're looking at that headline. This seems like comedy itself. You've got a man here who's dressed as a woman, and they're awarding this person Woman of the Year. Like, that's insane. It's certainly offensive to women, and it's kind of funny on its own. So we're looking at that and we're like, okay, well, you know, the project of satire really is to caricature things and to exaggerate them. How do we exaggerate this? Like, what do we do to caricature this? This feels like a caricature. And so we were struggling to think of an angle for this one, and then one of our writers pitched the idea that we just name Rachel Levine our pick for Man of the Year. We knew that there was the possibility of a penalty if we told the joke. We also knew that it was a joke worth telling, and that the ones that they don't want you to tell are the ones that you need to be telling. And so we published it, and, you know, the trans activists got a hold of it, and it attracted a lot of attention for being hateful, of course. And the next thing you know, Twitter sent us a notification saying that we violated their hateful conduct policy, and we were locked out of our account, and we needed to delete that joke in order to restore access to our account. At the time, we had 1.4 million followers. It was a big audience, and it drove a lot of traffic for us. And so that we did have a serious conversation about, and we went back and forth, and we were unanimous in deciding we can't respect ourselves if we're going to censor ourselves and take this down. For one thing, they could take it down if they wanted to. That's up to them. This is their platform. But they wanted us to take it down. For one thing, it's a joke. And for another thing, it's true that Rachel Levine is in fact a male, which there's nothing false in it, you know? And it's certainly not hateful to tell the truth, in our opinion. So we had this conversation. We're like, no, we're not gonna delete it. We're gonna come what may, we're gonna stand by this joke. And it could mean that we never tweet again. And that could very well be the case, is that we just lose access to our Twitter following. But at some point, if no one's willing to push back on that because they don't want to lose access to their following, then the tyrants win. Then they gain control. They only gain more power when we give them more power, instead of trying to take it back by saying, no, I'm not going to be strong-armed like that. I won't be on this platform if that's how it's going to be. It really seemed like everything was working against us, and that we were probably going to be setting ourselves up basically as martyrs, and that there may not be much that comes from it. And so I worried that maybe, is the bee big enough? Does it matter enough that people are really going to care? And right in the middle of me worrying about that, we got a message. It was funny because when you're locked out of your account, you can see messages, you just can't reply to them. So we had this message from Elon that we couldn't respond to. And we're like, Elon Musk is trying to get in touch with us. What do we do? Well, there was nothing we could do because we couldn't message him. And the only way to unlock that and message him would be to delete that tweet. And then we get a call from a number we don't know. And it's Elon Musk. He dug up our number and called and wanted to talk to us about the situation. He's like, I heard that you were suspended. Why not just delete it to get your account back? What's the big deal? What's the harm in that? And we explained our rationale there that, you know, it's a principle thing. You know, like, we have to be willing to stand by this and say we should have the right to tell jokes, especially jokes that carry the truth in them. That should be something that we're allowed to do in the public square. And he agreed with that wholeheartedly. At the end of the conversation, he closed it out. He goes, I might just need to buy Twitter. It's hard to get your hopes up that something like that might happen, that the world's richest man might end up bailing you out of Twitter jail. So watching that from the sidelines was very stressful. And we were, you know, we weren't communicating with him at that time. We were just watching it play out. And then finally he closes the deal. And then his first day as CEO, literally day one, he sends me a DM at 4 a.m. or something like that said, do you want the Babylon Bee restored? There will be no censorship of humor. So it was a very cool moment. A very cool moment in history, actually, to have been a part of that and to have seen some of it from behind the scenes. But profound for a number of reasons, because, you know, one of the key lessons I think that we can learn from both, I think, the Bee stand and what Elon did, was that you have to be willing to pay a price for freedom. You have to be willing to actually sacrifice something, or you risk losing it entirely. What I do now is very missional. It's impactful, it's important, and it's entertaining and it's fun. You know, the Babylon Bee is the most fun business that I've ever run, because what we're doing is just finding ways to make people laugh and bring levity in what are considered by many to be very dark times. And so probably the most common thing that I hear people say when they come up to me when I'm speaking somewhere, I'm somewhere in public, they'll say to me, thank you for keeping me sane. You know, the world has gone completely mad, but you guys keep me laughing at the madness. A sane society laughs at absurdity. Sane people laugh at absurd ideas. And if we've stopped laughing at the crazy, if we've stopped mocking the madness, then we've become mad ourselves. We've joined the lunatics in thinking that these things are okay, or that they should be affirmed, or that they should be tolerated. Being a Christian, having grown up in the church, and understanding not just, you know, the importance of truth and reason in these political debates, but at a spiritual level where the ultimate truth is coming to know Christ, realizing that we're sinners and that there's a way to redemption through him because of the price that he's paid on our behalf. That truth is so profoundly important, and anything that happens in the culture that separates people from that truth, that makes that seem absurd or silly or ridiculous, and then affirms these things that are in fact absurd and obscene and ridiculous in its place, that is a very sick spiritual state for society to be in. The amount of fire in the bellies of people that are fighting for literally chaos and destruction of all that's good and true it can't be natural. I don't think that it can be natural. And one of the reasons that I say that is because human beings are created in the image of God. And as image bearers, we have a desire for goodness and truth and beauty built into us. It's baked into us. I think by design, God made us that way so that we crave these things. And I think that people, especially if you deprive people of what they really need and what they really crave and what they were wired for by their own creator, their designer, then you will only in the end increase their craving for it. It's just like if you put a man out in the desert for long enough, he's going to become thirsty. And I think that our culture right now is a spiritual desert. I think that people are thirsty. So yes, there is a very real sense in which it's a spiritual war. And the extent to which we're engaged in that on that level, I mean, again, that's what the Bee has set out to do. I'm asked often, does the Babylon Bee have a mission statement or something like that, or some founding principles or whatever? The most concise way I can state our mission statement is that our goal is to ridicule bad ideas. And we do that for a spiritual reason. It's both in practical terms, bad ideas are catastrophic, but they're also spiritually catastrophic. They lead people away from God. They lead people away from truth. And so they have to be confronted. We have to bring people back. And so I think humor is a very effective way of doing that. And I do see the tide turning to some extent on that, because it's a common saying that people are waking up from woke. You hear that being said now because, wokeness has been exposed for what it is. And now that we have free speech on Twitter, at least, we're able to talk about these things and discuss them. And we're seeing a lot of pushback on these ideas. And so there's receptivity there to an alternative worldview. And so we have to be mindful of that there's now fertile soil where we can actually plant the truth and see it flourish. And the Bee is on a mission to do that. I talk about the social cancers and the need to cut them out, and the criticism that we get. We often get criticism from Christian audiences who tell us that what you're doing is wrong. How do you sleep at night? You're offending people, you're hurting people. Mockery is mean and cruel. And from a certain perspective, I can understand what they're saying, because if you zoom in, if you're watching a surgeon do surgery and you zoom in close enough, it just looks like a knife cutting skin. It looks like someone is harming another person. But if you zoom out and you see that he's wearing gloves and the garb and the mask, and you can tell that he's in an operating room, you see that this is someone who's actually cutting for a healing purpose. He's trying to help the patient. He's not just running around with a knife stabbing people and trying to hurt them. And that's really the mission of the Bee, is to operate more like the surgeon. We're not running around just cutting people, trying to hurt them and make them bleed. We are cutting for the healing purpose of trying to remove those social cancers, those spiritual cancers, so that they don't corrupt and destroy and kill. So it's not just not cruel and mean, it's the loving thing to do, to speak truth to a post-truth culture. That's the loving thing to do. In Corinthians, we read these passages at weddings about how love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast. But love also protects. Love protects the people from things that can harm them. And the bad ideas that are being promulgated in our culture are extremely harmful. And you're not loving anyone by being tolerant of those things or affirming those things. And so I think there's a moral imperative to challenge them, and to challenge them aggressively. I think it's the most exciting and impactful thing that I will ever do. And so as long as I'm running the Bee, I'll feel that it's extremely rewarding along those lines.